This episode of
You gotta fix it.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of COVID-19 and grief. Today I have with us Miss Kimberly Clark. And Kim, could you tell us some things about yourself?
Okay, my journey started when I was interning at the local hospice. I was working on my mental health counseling degree, and I worked with dying patients. I worked with families, I worked with the volunteers as well, and it is quite honoring when you're with people at this time when they lose someone. And I realized I had a gift of support. So the work was so rewarding, and that's why I got into it. I started my own business, Victory Over Loss. I'm a counselor as well as a life coach, working with people, helping them through their grief.
Wonderful. And Kim, you have been doing a grief support ministry at Faith. How long have you been doing the grief support at Faith?
It was about a year.
Okay.
And we stopped, and I would like to start again.
Well, we are glad to have you, and one of the reasons you're here today is because we're looking at restarting the grief support ministry, especially during this time. I believe that it is definitely needed during this time as we're learning how to cope with death and grief. And a new type of grief.
Yes, we are.
Because those things which we would usually do to try and bring closure, we can't do. We can't have the funeral.
Exactly.
There's no more repasses. That's what we would look for closure. And so we definitely need this grief support. Thank you. As I said, we're about to begin with our questions, but we also want you to know that you can text in your questions. There you'll see a number at the bottom of the screen. And as we're talking, please feel free to text in your questions, and we will answer your questions as they come in. Kim, could you just tell us what grief is? What does it look like?
Okay, so grief is our response to a loss. Not just a loss of a loved one. It could be a loss of a relationship, a job career, a pet. It could be anything. Now with COVID-19, we are losing our routines, our opportunities to come together, doing the traditional time Sundays, to go to church, birthdays. It's really hard, basically, for everyone. They have lost someone, and it's even more a bad situation when they have actually lost someone to the virus.
Okay. All right. So why do we grieve, or why not just avoid grieving altogether?
Well, the interesting thing is you can avoid it if you like, but don't do it for long. Avoidance could be just a temporary thing. People have to realize when we stuff our feelings, we can bring more harm to our bodies as well as our minds. People could, in addition to being overwhelmed with grief and the feelings of grief, physically they could have a rash, ongoing headaches, high blood pressure. Ultimately, grief will alter the heart and the brain.
Wow, so you're telling me if we do not deal with this, it could really affect us physically, not only mentally,
Absolutely.
but physically.
Absolutely. We are born to process things. We can't stuff it or just store it in. We store a lot in our memory, but in our body, we can't just store and stock up feelings. We have to process them.
That's good. That's good. What is the difference between grief and mourning?
Okay, grief, as we were talking about, it's internal. It's an inside thing. Mourning is an outwardly thing that we do. Dressing in black, having the funeral, the wake, having the repast, people making casseroles, bringing them to the house. That is your mourning. It's more of what's going on outside of you.
Okay. So grief is internal, mourning is external.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And so do the two ever mix?
Well, absolutely. If you have someone who's dying and you're anticipating their death, you're already grieving. So the grieving and the mourning is at the same time at times. The mourning will stop, and in some cultures, they'll continue to wear black. They will continue to visit the cemetery. But they can happen hand in hand, definitely.
When does grief end? Is there a set time for one to grieve, for you to get over your grief?
I'm glad that you asked that. Unfortunately, it's hard to tell anyone how long they would grieve. You can grieve before the death, up to 6 months, 5 years, and beyond. Some people will spend the rest of their life grieving, unfortunately.
Yeah. I was talking to just a parishioner. She was telling me that she had not gotten over the death of her son.
Absolutely.
That was about 10 years ago, I believe. And then it triggered her because she just lost another loved one. She lost a mother. And so she was telling me she had pretty much grief on top of grief. So can past grieving experience, is that brought up? Is that normal? Is that
Absolutely.
natural?
We all have triggers. A lot of times in avoidance, you have people, places, and things that you avoid to not have those feelings. But unfortunately, we cannot avoid death. Death is among us every single day. So a death will trigger feelings of another loved one that you have lost. Or in a relationship, or in a job, you get those same feelings. Like, I remember when this happened. You begin to know yourself more as you experience loss.
So how do you deal with knowing that you can have triggers? How do you deal with that? If you say that, I'm still grieving 10 years later, how do you deal with that? What's the next step?
Well, basically, you always have to work through your feelings. I will encourage any of my clients to always work through their feelings. You have to confront the feelings and work through them. Or take a repass. You have to pull back, and it's okay to rest. It's okay to rest. But just know, as you have those feelings, you have to confront them and deal with them. They will lessen. They will lessen. But sometimes it's just like losing a child. That's just like a deep hole inside a parent. That's the worst loss that you can experience. And they carry that loss for their life until death.
Wow. Let me ask you this. So I know a lot of times we talk about individuals have different feelings when it comes to grief. Some people are angry. Some people are sad. Some people are in just doubt and disbelief, can't believe it happened. And I think those are all a part of stages. So what are all of the stages of grief? What do they look like? And how do you go through those things?
Okay, there are 5 stages. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, back in 1969, came up with these stages. Denial, anger, depression, bargaining, and acceptance. With denial, you can't believe that it is happening. You want it another way, and you will bargain with the Lord. If you make him better, if you make her better, I will do this. If you bargain with the Lord. That's basically what you do. A lot of times when it's not working out for you, you become very angry. Sometimes people become angry with the loved ones that have passed away. There's a lot of regret in that. And then you rest on the acceptance. That's where everybody wants to get to, is the acceptance of their loved one and losing having them being a part of their life. That's a wonderful place to be. But unfortunately, there's no order for these stages. Everyone experiences them differently.
Okay. All right. And so, would you ever suggest, I know we talk about support groups, how do you feel that support groups affect us for the better? Or do you think support groups are necessary as we're going through these type of feelings?
Absolutely. They are so important, because guess what? When you're amongst a group, you realize you are not alone. You are not crazy. You hear someone else's story, and everyone's story is different, but you realize you're not grieving alone. My main objective is for any of my clients not to grieve alone. Sometimes you need the one-on-one care. This is what they prefer, but I will always encourage support groups, because there a lot of growth is made.
Wow. Let's say, so maybe we aren't the ones grieving, but we have friends who are grieving. How do we go about encouraging them, trying to be there for them during their time?
Well, it's very important to always check in. Check in with your friends, family, anyone that has lost someone, and realize that everyone grieves differently. So don't tell them to get over it. It's going to be all right. You should get out the house. You can offer, hey, let's do this. But if they're not interested, you got to respect that. Keep them on your radar. Check in them. Text, maybe a phone call, send a card. But always just let them know that you're near, and at any time they want to open up, that you will be there for them.
Wow, that's good. Let me ask you this. So if as we're talking about grief, there are those who say, I feel alone, that no one understands me, that I'm in a dark place. How do you respond to that?
I suggest a support group. They have to be around people who have experienced that loss. With COVID-19, this is what's keeping us away from each other. We can't come together. We have Zoom and everything like that, and I would suggest anyone to be a part of a support group. And sometimes a whole family experience the same loss. Come together as a family, talk about that person, bring out pictures of that person, bake a recipe of mamas or grandmamas, and share with one another, talking, telling jokes and stories of your loved one. That is very soothing.
Yes. So since we can't grieve like we would normally do and mourn like we would normally do, what are some suggestions? What are some innovative ways that we can practice our grief, or we can have an outlet for our grief?
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up. I would like to offer the church a support group, a morning and an evening group that can bring people together. It's about the togetherness, and with COVID-19 here, it's just very hard for us to be able to do that. But it's very important to be close, talk about your feelings, express what you're feeling, share that. You're not alone in it. You don't think you're crazy. Get whatever book you can about grief and loss and read. Download Audible. Listen to an Audible book. There are millions of books out there about grief and loss and how to overcome.
Well, thank you for that. So we will be starting back up our grief ministry, and we'll be doing it via Zoom right now.
Yep.
Because we are not able to physically meet, but we can meet via the internet, and it'll allow us an opportunity to interact with each other and to see each other. And so with that, we're asking that if you're interested in taking part of our grief support ministry, that you email us at griefsupport@faithtabct.org. You should see it on your screen, or you may call the church office at 203-348-8755. Again, 203-348-8755. And the question is, do you have to be a member of Faith to take part?
No, you don't have to be a member. Grieving, we're in it together. We're in this together.
We are in this together, and so we welcome you, anyone from the community. And sometimes it's better to be in a position where others may not know you.
Exactly.
Because sometimes you're more open to share with an anonymity portion of it. Yeah. So we welcome you. We hope that you will join us for our Zoom. If you email us, we will get back to you with the information of the actual dates when we'll start and the information to log in for our grief support meetings.
Yes.
Kim, thank you again for joining us and just for speaking on grief today. I think this is so needed now.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. It's something that's going to happen every single day of our lives. We're all going to die. We need to be comfortable with ourselves to express our feelings when we lose loved ones. We have to be there. We need to come together and take care of one another. Don't avoid people when someone died. Just check in on them. Ask them how they're doing. It's just a very important, and it's an easy thing to do.
Yes.
We all have to just build up that courage.
Yes. That's a great word, that we need to check in on each other.
Yes.
During this time, just this morning, my daily devotional was on that serving is the remedy for our suffering. And when we check in on others and we're not self-centered, but we're others-centered, even in the midst of our suffering, that there's something that happens when we help others, that it infuses us and that it renews us so that we have joy from helping somebody else.
Yes, it's very empowering. Very empowering.
Yes. Yeah. Well, thank you again. This concludes our talk on COVID-19 and grief. I pray that you have enjoyed it. And again, Kim, thank you again.
Thank you for having me.
All right. You have a great day, and we'll see you next time.